Thank you all so much for joining us today. This is a great opportunity to learn from two exceptional interns that we've had throughout the summer, Crystal Singletary and Wiaka Privite. We're so appreciative of their time and efforts to pull together presentations. I'm going to share a little bit about the scope of the internship program and the unique features for this year that we implemented to ensure everybody was safe and was able to have a robust and fruitful experience. My name is Kier Johnson Reyes. I'm an Osage Nation tribal member, and I work for Intertribal Agriculture Council as the national lead for the Technical Assistance Program and the Pacific Region Technical Assistance Specialist. Really appreciative of you all joining today. So the internship program here in California that has been designed in collaboration with a wonderful colleague at UC Davis, as well as a past tribal liaison for NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service, has been implemented for about 5 years or so. And of course, this is our first year contending with pandemic. And so we worked directly with California NRCS leadership to design a bit of a hybrid program to ensure our interns this summer could engage in some great site visits and learn on site by taking their own vehicles to the sites, and of course wearing masks and being out practicing safe social distancing and the like. They've gone to amazing sites there in direct coordination with some of our very valued partners within NRCS. I want to just take this moment to share my appreciation for the team at NRCS that has been involved. Todd Golder, as well as Aaron Taylor, Kaget McQuillan. I also want to give a shout out to Lonix Landry there with Humboldt State University, who's been involved in helping to provide some supplemental opportunities and experience for the interns. I see Trevor Super on. Thank you so much for your support and contribution to the internship programming this year as well. We also had some really amazing partnership sites that they'll talk about this year, and so we really appreciate all the great added value and experiences that the interns were able to engage in through our partners. But yeah, our internship program here in California is multi-pronged. It usually will involve a site placement at a field office, an NRCS field office in close proximity to the native student intern. And also we'll leverage a partnership with a tribal department, such as a natural resources or tribal lands department, or an organization that's working on a tribal active restoration project. And then the interns will also identify a research topic and design some work around that particular topic that aligns with their interests and their goals. And we do a lot of direct interface with the interns throughout the program to ensure that they have a really strong network of support, and we can field questions throughout the time. And so in a short period of time, they've gained a lot of experience, and they've really been able to make some major headway towards goals that they had for, extracurricular activities and that are inclined towards their professional goals. So we're so appreciative of the time and efforts of their experience and all those involved. And without further ado, I'd like to jump right in and ask Crystal to go ahead and provide her presentation. She's going to share her screen, and then can be off and running.
Thank you, Kier. Yeah, let me get my screen. Oh, here. All right, can everyone see it?
You're good.
Okay. Welcome to my presentation for the Intertribal Agricultural Council and the Intertribal Student Services Internship that I participated in this summer. My name is Crystal Singletary. I am a Maidu woman at HSU, and I will be going into my last semester this fall at Humboldt State, where I will graduate with a Bachelor's of Science degree in ecological restoration and a minor in geospatial information systems. The partners that came together this summer to make this internship happen were the Intertribal Agricultural Council, Blue Lake Rancheria, Natural Resource Conservation Service, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Bureau of Indian Affairs, and the Intertribal Student Services as part of HSU. The order of my presentation today, first I will talk about some of our NRCS field visits, and then I'll talk about my research project, and lastly I'll talk about volunteering. So our NRCS partner was Tom Golder, who is the range specialist at NRCS Eureka, as well as being a range professor at Humboldt State University. He took us out every Thursday to different sites around Humboldt County. And this first site that we went to, I nicknamed the Morris property. It was up in the Wildcat Mountains. And the management goals that we discussed while we were there were various points of access to water and cross fencing. The landowner needed to create better access to water because right here in the photo you can see the cattle. You can't really tell, but they're on a hill, and so their only access to water is actually down the hill. And so a couple times every day whenever they're thirsty, they have to walk down this road and get water and then walk back up the hill as they are hungry and they would like to eat and graze. This is not only tiresome on the cattle, but it's also detrimental to the land that they're walking on, as it's like an access road and they're compacting the soil, creating erosion, and it's just not good for the environment. And so the landowner would like to establish a rotational grazing routine, and this will be done through the cross fencing. And then within the different grazing pastures, there will be troughs installed that will better enhance the access of water for these cattle. At this site, we also learned what step point is, and it's basically just a quick composition or species composition methodology. I will not be getting into the nitty-gritty details of this methodology just for time constraints of this presentation. However, if you would like to know more about it, you can always ask me at the end. And these are just two photos of Todd showing us what to do. The next place we went to was Felt Ranch on Old Arcata Road, right across the street from Freshwater Farms. And this site was super interesting because it was two different reserves right next to each other. And so the first part of the land that you see in the photo in the foreground is actually a perpetual wetland easement meant to preserve wetland function and wildlife habitat provided by that wetland. And so when it is in an easement, NRCS does all of the management. The landowner, for better or for worse, has no responsibility for managing that wetland. And this is opposed to the other half of the property, which you can kind of see in the background. Not very well, but it is a grazing reserve. And so all NRCS does for this is write a grazing prescription for the rancher, and it is up to the rancher to implement and manage his land according to the grazing prescription. So it was really cool to see these two different reserves right next to each other. While we were out there, one of the main goals that we talked about was protecting the wetland and providing cross fencing, which I will talk about on the next slide. And so on the left over here, you are looking east up into Felt Ranch, and you can see this bare ground in the foreground. That was actually planted with riparian species, but because the cattle are trying to access this creek, freshwater creek that runs through the wetland, they have completely trampled and compacted that soil, making it harder for plants to reestablish there. And so NRCS will have to go in and replant that, as well as provide some fencing to protect the wetland from the cattle. The middle photo that you see right here is an example of a trough that will be installed throughout the property to enhance water access and keep the cattle away from freshwater creek. This is also a good example of a standard trough that can be installed on ranches throughout Humboldt County. And this last photo, you're just looking towards the west toward Old Arcata Road. And I just wanted to give you an idea of what the wetland reserve to look like. And so the next site that we went to, I nicknamed Grizzly Bluff. It's right at the base of the Wildcats. And Todd brought us out here to talk about channel restoration that was happening on this property. The landowner would like to add natural meanders back into this creek system. As you can see, it's very narrow and very straight, which in the winter will increase water velocity and cause erosion and just further channelizing of this creek. The landowner would also like to plant a riparian corridor to protect this creek, and I am just so impressed with this landowner who is willing to sacrifice some of his grazing pasture for the sake of a dynamic and healthy ecosystem, the watercourse, by adding meanders and a riparian corridor. Because of all of this channel restoration going on, the road to the left, you can see a little bit of it in the photo, will have to be realigned, and that is also a major restoration project. Here are some photos. On the left, you have a very cute cow, and this is the livestock that the landowners are transitioning from. This middle photo is an undersized, deteriorating culvert that is creating a pinch point in the creek, blocking the creek from flowing naturally, and that will have to be replaced. On the left here, you have the livestock that the ranchers are transitioning to, which is sheep. And in the background right here, this water trough will be updated, similar to a trough that you saw at Felt River Ranch. It will be updated and it will protect the land and the animals as they're getting water. Our last stop was Fort Baker Ranch, and Todd brought us out here to look at a prescribed burn that happened on the land. The burn happened because of the management goals to preserve the oak woodlands. This ranch is a generational ranch. It was passed down from the landowner's dad to him. And so he would like to preserve the oak woodlands that he ran through as a child. And another management goal was to access water. However, I'll talk about that on the next slide. And so what you're looking at in this photo right here is after the prescribed burn. You can see a couple snags, dead trees that were left by the burn. Unfortunately, this prescribed burn burned too hot because there was too much fuel on the ground that didn't get taken out before the burn was started. And so it actually did kill some very prominent oak trees in this woodland. which is very unfortunate because it's not what the landowner wanted. It's not what NRCS wanted. It just goes to show that not everything goes according to plan and you have to adjust. So to increase access to water on this ranch, the landowner is doing two things. On the left, you can see Wiaka up there, and in the foreground, she's walking around a water trough that is connected to a spring catchment system that the landowner has installed. This is one way to enhance water access, and the other way that the landowner and NRCS is doing is a little experimental. And so what you're seeing in this photo on the right is a corrugated roof with a gutter attachment. And when it rains, the gutter will direct the water into a storage tank similar to this one. And then this will be hooked up via pipeline to this larger water tank that the landowner currently is filling up manually. And so this larger water tank will then be connected to other troughs in the surrounding area through or via pipeline, enhancing the water access for the cattle in the surrounding areas. And so how does it all connect? How do these NRCS field visits connect with indigenous food systems? And I see it in a couple different ways. And so I see it as indigenous practices are being brought back into the ecosystems. And this is happening in two different ways. One is a physical. The fire is being brought back to the landscapes, which is a traditional indigenous way of managing. And Wiaka will talk more about bringing fire back to the landscape in her presentation. Another way that I see these two connecting is indigenous worldviews are being brought back to the landscape. In my experience, non-indigenous restorationists think of restoration as piecemeal, as we need to fix the creek and then we need to fix the trees. Whereas indigenous ecological worldview is like the trees and the creek are connected, and so we have to restore all of them together. And this is exemplified by the Felt Creek landowner who is bringing back an entire riparian ecosystem into his land, and he's even sacrificing part of his grazing pastures for the sake of a healthy ecosystem on his land. And I'm very impressed with that, and it's very uplifting to see that my indigenous ways of thinking are also like permeating non-indigenous ways of thinking. Now I will talk about my research project that I did this summer out at Blue Lake Rancheria. My point person and mentor was Michelle Fuller, who is an environmental director at Blue Lake Rancheria. And my research project was an old school literature research project. So I did do some field work, but that wasn't the main component of my research. The main component of my research was literature. And so I read through a bunch of tribal documents, Wiyot history, Blue Lake Rancheria history. I read through some interviews with tribal members. I called nurseries to figure out what kind of plants they had, how much they cost. And I looked through other documents for culturally significant plants to the Wiyot. And so a lot of my research was more literature as opposed to being out in the field. However, I did do some field work. I took an inventory site analysis, and I came away with 154 linear feet of this creek need to be restored. And the entire area of my design plan is 6,400 square feet, because this is the amount of break in the riparian corridor that needs to be revegetated. And my design, my revegetation design plan will then be used by Blue Lake Rancheria to obtain grant funds to implement my design. And these are just some photos of my my site, my restoration site. And on this left photo right here, I hope everybody can see my cursor, but this is School Creek. And as you can tell, just this is all covered in invasive grasses and teasel and blackberry. And up here on the left is the east side of the bank, where you can see that it's being mowed by Blue Lake Rancheria within 15 feet of the creek. And you can still see all of those invasive grasses. And this bottom photo is an overview of the entire restoration site, all 6,400 square feet. And so lastly, I'll be talking about some of my volunteering that I did this summer. I volunteered out at the community farm at Blue Lake Rancheria with Daniel Holzapfel, who is the main guy in charge of the farm. So far, the farm has produced 5,000 pounds of produce, which 400 pounds of that has gone to their elders program that they have out at Blue Lake Rancheria. I will not go into that for time constraints, but again, just ask me at the end if you'd like to know more about it. And currently we are planning for the fall season to grow plants. What I did out there was I harvested beans, as you can see in the top left. I also harvested strawberries and squash, and the other day we got 70 pounds of corn. I also planted agave, winter crops, or I created winter crop rows, as you can see in the bottom. I transplanted squash, as you can see in the top right. And then I was also doing general gardening duties, such as weed eating and pulling bugs off plants. Thank you for your time. I'm sorry I went over. I know it's only supposed to be 15 minutes, but thank you. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Do I stop sharing?
Are you there? Sorry about that. I was on mute. Crystal, thank you so much. Could you talk a little bit about the critical habitat and the implications for your, your assessment work that you did for Blue Lake there to salmon and to other fish populations?
Yeah, and so that's a good question. Thank you. The entire goal of the revegetation plan that I was writing was to enhance the creek habitat, because it does flow in the winter and it provides refuge for salmon and for other fish of the Mad River to go up into and get away from the main channel. And so creek health was a main goal. And then another goal that we were trying to accomplish with the actual vegetation in the design was to improve wildlife habitat for like the birds and the deer and the small like mammals that call Blue Lake home. And so those were the two critical habitats that we were trying to cover.
Thanks so much. All right, any other questions or comments for Crystal at this time? All right, we'll have some time at the end too for both interns to field questions. Thank you so much, Crystal. It's very informative.
Thank you.
All righty, so I'll go ahead and share my screen and allow Wiaka to present next. And then Wiaka, just let me know when you'd like to advance your slides there.
All right, hello everybody. Can you hear me, Kier?
Yep, you're good to go.
All right, thank you. So this is my presentation for the Intertribal Agriculture Council and the Intertribal Student Service Internship for the summer of 2020. You can advance. Sorry, everybody, I had technical difficulties with my computer, so. All right, so I'm Kaduk from the Klamath River, and I'm attending Humboldt State University. I'm a forestry major, and I am a junior currently. And my concentration is in wildland fire management, and then I have a minor in GIS. And my long-term goal is to be a registered professional forester. I'd really like to work with tribes throughout the state, as well as landowners, ultimately to help restore historical fire regimes and to, keep our communities safe and to really restore these fire-resistant landscapes. I'd really also like to integrate the traditional ecological knowledge into my land management practices as well. Okay, next. So same as Crystal, there's a lot of similar partnerships here, but I also have the Potawatomi Community Food Garden, as well as the U.S. Forest Service through the Six Rivers National Forest. Same as her is the Intertribal Agriculture Council, Natural Resource Conservation Service, U.S. Wild Fish and Wildlife, and Bureau of Indian Affairs. Okay, next. So the components of my internship, it ends up being a full-time internship. It was split into 3 different parts. 3 days a week, I worked with Dr. Frank Lake through my research project. I worked once a week at Potawatomi Community Food Garden. In the middle is the, I think, 4,000 strawberry plants that we have. And I also worked 1 day a week with Crystal and our mentor, Todd Golder, working for NRCS doing the field visits. Okay, next. I think Crystal did a really great job talking about the NRCS component of what we did, but some of the things that I wanted to focus on are what I learned, and that was, identifying some of those challenges that the landowners face. Obviously, the grazing patterns, invasive species, predators. Crystal talked about the channel restorations and wetland restorations that they have to deal with and focus on. Land management approaches in the rangeland and wetland settings. So, just the riparian fencing, whether it be adding culverts, ditch restoration, piping for the troughs, also reintroducing the native grasses to the landscape. Those are really great in the forage value, as well as the bank stabilization for erosion control. Another really important component of this was the permit process. I think it's something that everyone in this field is going to need to become familiar with, and it's a really lengthy process. Obviously, we didn't have to do the permits ourselves, but we were able to start to understand the magnitude and the length of time that it takes to actually make these land management projects happen. And we also learned into road assessments, just being able to identify issues in a road and how it can contribute to land problems. Just sort of the language that also follows with road assessment. It was just a really great introduction to seeing a big picture management approach. Okay, next. So some of these are the restoration examples that we dealt with. On the left is Bear River Ranch. It's a really massive ranch out by Bear River. It's about 27,000 acres. And this landowner went ahead and did a prescribed fire for coyote brush control. And in the far, you can see on that ridgelet, all the green is the coyote brush, and that has not yet been treated. And it was a really great contrast to see how well that's working. The middle ridge got burned, I think it was 2 years ago. And it's done a really great job to control the coyote brush as well as other invasive species. On the top right is Fort Baker. Crystal talked about Fort Baker, but it is another prescribed fire setting where it was trying to get rid of the encroaching Doug fir to restore the oak woodlands. And what I really liked about this project is that it didn't go perfectly. They actually had some issues with the fire being too hot, and actually it killed some of the oaks that they were trying to save. So we were able to talk about kind of how things go right and sort of how things go wrong, which I think is a really important thing to focus on because it doesn't always go how we think it's going to go. And so to get other people's perspective on how they could have done it better was really valuable to me. More tricks and tips of the trade is this tree girdling method. I had always known of it, but it's actually taking a strip of the bark off of the tree and it kills the tree eventually. But I didn't realize that you could use it in a stand where this is actually a Doug fir in that oak woodland setting. And if they would actually fall that tree, it would damage the surrounding trees. So instead they girdle it and it kills the tree slowly and then it'll end up breaking down and topple over from windbreak or whatever. And it actually creates more habitat that way so that not all of the woody debris is removed from the site. Okay, next. For my volunteer, I worked at the Potawatomi Community Food Garden, which has actually been my employer in the past. I worked with them all summer and throughout last fall. So it was really cool to go back through a different lens of volunteering. Potawatomi Community Food Service is from the United Indian Health Service through the Community Nutrition Program. And it's a 3-acre organic garden located in Arcata. They're certified for farmers market, but the garden does a really great job of like involving the community, and not only like the clients themselves, but just the community as a whole. So they add workshops, they invite volunteers to come in and actually touch the food and help us with all the components of gardening. They also do workshops for pruning. We invite the youth in to help and get them interested in the garden settings. We teach them about herbs, their little herb garden. Yeah, it's a great way to get people involved with where their food comes from. On the left there, that's a squash patch from last year. And then the broccoli planting was actually this year. And we are working with masks this year, which is definitely an interesting new dynamic of it. And my favorite kitty there under my lap. Okay, go ahead next. So like I said, I've helped to work there before, so I knew the garden really well, which is helpful for them. But I was able to participate more this time in the farmers market aspect. So it was a lot of harvesting of the produce to take. Strawberries are probably one of our most popular and favorite fruits that we produce. I showed you the picture of all the strawberry plants that we have. But I also helped with a lot of other areas. So on the left is soil prepping. That's actually now squash and lemon cucumber bed. So adding the amendments to the soil, learning about those soil amendments and how it really contributes to the growth of these plants. Again, everything is organic in the garden. In the middle, that was from last year's farmers market. It's definitely changed this year. We have to have more obvious social distancing. We have a whole new setup, but I just thought that was a really pretty picture. Again, Ginger, the garden cat, and he likes to help weed. Apparently it's him riding in the wheelbarrow. And then the carrot harvest. So the other things that I helped with are like the drip system, another component that they add for the workshops as well. Okay, next. My research was probably the biggest component of this internship for me. I worked with Dr. Frank Lake. He's one of the leading fire ecologists in the world, but he's a research ecologist through the Pacific Southwest Research Station at Six Rivers National Forest. And this current project that he's working on is with the Western Klamath Restoration Partnership. There's a lot I could say about WKRP. It's probably leading right now in the world for modeling this collaboration process. There's a lot of different components on the bottom there, but that's just to really emphasize how big of a project this is. Those are all different agencies that they're working with to make this happen. Go ahead, you can shift. So WKRP, their goal is to reintroduce fire into the landscape. And it creates these fire adapted communities. They're also looking to create healthy river systems and resilient biodiverse forest, as well as really aiding in the vitality of culture and community in their area. It's 7,000 acres that actually belong to the Forest Service that they're working with. But this partnership is divided up, and right now I think they have 1.2 million acres that they're eventually going to be working on. But for my specific research project, we were focused on the Somes Bar pilot project, which is in red on the map. And this is all in Cotica ancestral territory, which is really great because I'm also getting my hands involved in my local area that I absolutely love. In these 4 different units, plots were pre-established in 2014. And then in 2015, they went in and started the various parameters that they're looking at in these specific plots. And so they're located throughout. There's approximately 20 in each of those 4 locations. The bigger picture here is that my research project is based on Dr. Frank Lake's project, and he's looking at evaluating these aerial and TLS LiDAR imagery. And the idea is to build these models for fire behavior, to understand fuel loading and how wildfire could, it can change the landscape. But they want to be able to put it together so that with the fuel reduction, it's not so catastrophic. And so again, he's doing that by post and prior manual and mechanical treatments to prepare for these fires that they're introducing to the landscape. And this is also for this particular research project, which is a small part of WKRP, is for specific management for cultural use. Okay, next. This is just an idea of some of the plants and trees that we're managing for, things like madrone, pepperwood, hazelnut, sugar pine, tan oak, black oak, white oak, dogwood. These are species that would be used historically for forage. Okay, next. So the research component of this was the main question based around how do forest conditions affect tribal use of these resources. And we hypothesized that these denser forests, due to tree density, the canopy closure, fuel loading, it really reduces the tribal access to and the resource quality of these particular species. Unfortunately, Dr. Frank Lake got called out on a fire, so the analysis part of this is kind of put on hold. But the idea is to eventually look at this linear regression to compare this tree canopy closure, fuel load, and pre and post treatment of these areas. The photo here is actually one of the largest tan oak trees I've ever seen in my life. It measured at 97 inches in diameter. So this is definitely a notable tree that was obviously cared for by someone historically. And so the idea is to get rid of this understory to really help open it up so that tribal people can come back and utilize these resources that the forest was actually designed to do for thousands of years prior to fire suppression. Okay, next. So this is the idea of the plot themselves. Like I said, there's about 20 of them in each of the units. The protocols were designed in 2014. So teams went out in 2015, and within this 17-meter plot, they took note of the tree species, like individual trees. They were numbered, they were measured in their diameter, their height, the tree crown class, which is deciding whether or not it is dominant, codominant, intermediate, or suppressed. They looked at the height to live crown base, and this is an idea of how high can the flames go before they jump into the crown, which causes mortality in really severe burn cases. They looked at crown widths and fuel transects. So Frank and I, when we went in, some of the plots, the information wasn't complete, so we had to figure out what we needed to do to complete the data. And in some of the plots, the treatment had already been done. So it's a matter of taking note and sort of remeasuring so that we can use that data to make those comparisons in our analysis. Yeah, and we also got to go through, which I thought was really cool, being that I am a forester to be, we got to go through and mark which trees we thought should actually be removed to allow more room for these species that we're trying to manage for. They had done it in some of the plots, and then we got to go back through the ones that had been treated to see if they took the trees we were hoping they would. Yeah, it was just a really great perspective of sort of what's to come for my future. Okay, next. Some photos of the field. On the left is Dr. Frank Lake. The field transects, they call them brown transects. It's a matter of actually counting all the little tiny twigs along the way. So, I mean, hundreds of twigs for, you know, this maybe 5-meter parameter that we're looking at. And he's also looking up too. So it's not just on the ground, it's whether or not there are dead fuels that are up to 2 meters above the ground. So we're looking at everything from there on. And in the middle is the data sheet for that Brown's transect. And I'm looking at the litter and duff measurements there. And again, it's to get an idea of how hot a fire would burn based upon the litter that's fallen from the trees. The deeper the litter, the more chance of a pretty severe burn. And on the left, that is poison oak. So it wasn't, you know, it wasn't all flat ground. This is very, very steep terrain. It is very brushy, and there's a lot of poison oak in there. And part of what fire does is to help sort of control these sort of things. There is a blue tape there on the ground where the transects are set up in the cardinal directions. So we got to travel through all the poison oak. Fortunately, I don't get it too bad. But again, it's one of those things that when we're going to work in these conditions, we have to be prepared for these things. So, you know, really learning to be diligent with my TechNu was great. And just knowing sort of what to expect, especially because the other part of this component is in grassland. So it was really great to see a diverse landscape through this internship. Okay, next. On the left, this is an untreated unit, and on the right has been treated. These are different places, so it's really impossible to actually compare. But just to give you an idea of how dense the forest can be, I mean, it was in like a jungle in some places. There's a lot of pepperwood in there, and I see a lot of grape. This will be treated. Some areas are located in riparian zones, so they'll just have manual treatment, which means they can go in with chainsaws and remove some of the debris that's there and some of these fuels that are sort of accumulating there. And I believe the one on the left will not be burned, but hopefully we can open it up and allow for the pepperwoods to get some sunlight and grow bigger. Then on the right, this one actually will be burned. But for now, they went through and you can see there's sunlight actually on the forest floor, which is great for like the oak seedlings. Without light, there's not much that they can do. And this, again, will be burned. So we're trying to get an idea of how hot a fire will burn based upon the size of the fuel. So there's 1-hour fuels, 10-hour fuels, 100-hour fuels, and 1,000-hour fuels. My research component was definitely mostly in the field. However, we did get to spend a little bit of time at the PSW research station, which is really beautiful. It's located in Arcata. And there's a picture on the bottom, and that's the hallway. I don't know if you can see it, but Frank Lake is all the way at the end of that hallway. And that's actually where the copier is. So we had to prepare for our data sheets and getting ready to go out to the field. And so I probably made 100 trips up and down that hallway getting ready for the field. Yeah, I think, you know, at the end, school can teach us a lot of things, but it's really these experiences on the ground that help prepare us for our career. And I really love that this gave me an idea of the spectrum of food sovereignty. It's really all connected, whether it's managing the forest for forage and cultural involvement, whether it be rangeland. We're going to eat beef. That's kind of just how it is, whether it be cattle, whether it be sheep, being able to manage that landscape for food, as well as just in a garden. I think that all these things and all these different aspects need to be addressed as a whole to really allow for these sustainable food sources. And it allows connection and protection with the land. And I'm just so thankful that I got to have this really diverse experience. So that's all. You can go to the next one. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wiaka, for your excellent presentation as well, and for also talking a little bit about some of your key takeaways there at the end. Can you share a little bit about what you might provide as advice to future prospective interns or intern students that would be kind of like grappling with whether they should consider applying for an internship like this or not?
I would say always take an internship. It's truly the only way. Like those little tips and tricks that I talked about that you're only going to learn in the field, and to be able to take those experiences with you to a job makes you very valuable. I've been able to have a lot of different intern experiences, which is really great. But I also recommend going on internships that you might not think you would normally do as far as your main focus. So whether it be going to a new place or having it be a little bit varying in what you think you'd be doing. It was because of WKRP that I decided to go to school for forestry. I was able to work on that project in 2016 before I had started school. And through that experience, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And sometimes it takes having new experiences to know which direction you really want to go in.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful. Let's see, do we have any questions on Facebook coming in, Courtney? Okay, nothing. We just got, something from Lennox just sharing that did a great job, and really appreciates the patience that's been applied for both of you to the process of coordinating so many partnerships and everything. So thank you all. We had some great participation from our partners on the internship, so really appreciate you all joining. And there's been really good participation on Facebook as well. So hand clap emojis, looks like. So I'll just say on behalf of IAC how appreciative we are to work with both of you, and it's just been a joy. This is a culmination presentation for your internship, and we're absolutely able to feel into the intricacies of your internship experience by your amazing presentations there. So thank you again, and I don't think there's any other questions. So with that, we can kind of wrap up. Do you all have any final thoughts? Maybe start with you, Crystal.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to everyone involved, all of the partnerships, the partnering agencies. A special thank you to Todd Golder, who took us out every Thursday and really put thought behind where we were going and why we were going. All of my people out at Blue Lake, they were great. They made sure I didn't fall behind. And to you, Kier, for making sure that we're on track, and if I needed anything, you were there. I just really appreciate all of the knowledge and experience that I have gained, because as Wiaka said, internships are so important for learning on the ground skills and techniques that make you valuable to an employer, or if you want to go out and do something on your own. And so I just want to express my gratitude for everyone involved. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Crystal. Uyaka?
Man, she took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was going to say. Thank you, Crystal. And thank you, Crystal. We were site partners on Thursdays, and I just had a really great time with you. And definitely to Todd Golder, I really, really appreciate everything that you did for us. And yeah, for my partner sites, for Dr. Frank Lake, and for the Potawatomi Community Food Garden.
Excellent. Well, it's been a great time all around. So thank you all so much. We're going to go ahead and wrap up now. And again, appreciate all the partnerships and those that were able to join today. I hope you all have a good rest of your day. Take care.